Dr. Sushil Kumar Chauhan is very difficult for me at least, because he is one of the legends in our field. And we have been together for last almost 13, 14 years, and he has been continuing this particular clinical meeting, so-called CME, from last so many years. And we definitely, all of Physician Forum members have been definitely benefited intellectually, clinically, and other forms. Sushil is one of the leading diabetologists in the Odisha. He is Morani and MD medicine from Southern Hospital and practicing for almost now 25 years. So he doesn't need much introduction to Physician Forum of India, because he is I would call the pivotal, the whole forum. To introduce the topic, the holistic CV, kidney, metabolic risk management, type 2 diabetes management, appraisal of foundation evidence and place of SGLT2 inhibitors. As we all know, SGLT2 inhibitors are a novel anti-diabetic medication that lowers plasma glucose level without causing hyperglycemia by increasing urinary glucose secretion. Also reduces the body weight, abdominal weight, reduces the blood pressure, improves lipid profile, and so many other pleomorphic effects of SGLT2 inhibitors in the practice field. So we are definitely having a very good molecule in management for diabetes. So we are going to learn more from Dr. Sushil how best we can be using this medication in diabetic plus diabetic-related comorbidity. Over to Sushil.
Thank you very much, sir. I hope I am audible to everyone.
Yes, you are audible. Yes.
Right, and my slide is being seen by everyone?
Yes, first slide is visible, sir.
Yeah, this is the first slide. This is just the topic which Dr. Mathur sir has introduced so beautifully. And I'm extremely grateful to Dr. S.K. Mathur sir, the patron of the forum, to Dr. P.K. Gupta sir, the president of the forum, to accept me with all my deficiencies, with all my pitfalls, to be one of the steering members of this forum. We have been working in the field of education for the last 17 years, 671 physical meetings, and now more than 100 webinars on digital platforms over the last nearly 2 years. I am extremely grateful to Dr. S.K. Mathur sir especially for chairing this session for me. I know he has been extremely busy. I have been keeping him busy with other talks from other speakers, but it was so nice of him to welcome me on board and to accept this offer to chair this meeting. I am extremely grateful to the wonderful team of Boehringer Ingelheim, led wonderfully by Mr. Anuj, then spearheaded by Mr. Pankaj, and foot soldiered by Mr. Vivek and Mr. Mukesh. As all of you know, friends, that this is a new molecule. Over the last 5 to 6 years, the SGLT2 inhibitor, empagliflozin, and so much evidence has now accumulated in favor of the molecule, whether it is cardiovascular outcomes, renal outcomes, cardiac outcomes, heart failure outcomes, real world evidence that it is difficult to ignore this molecule, and it almost seems that if we are not using this molecule, it is a disservice to our patients. So wherever we can, we should. So I would start my topic. Dr. S.K. Mathur sir has already introduced the topic. Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words. Holistic CV kidney metabolic risk management in type 2 diabetes. Appraisal of foundational evidence and place of SGLT2 inhibitors. So we'll be revising the evidence, and we'll be revising the status of some of the trials that have been done on this molecule, and then we will see where does it fit in our scheme of things and where we should be using it. So this is the National Health Agenda for 2025. We want to decrease the CV deaths by 25% in India, and it's in the context of the global burden of CV disease from 1990 to 2016. CV deaths in Indian population as a percent of overall deaths. It was 15% in 1990 and it was at a staggering figure of 28%, nearly double in 2016, just in a matter of 25 years. And I will not be surprised that if it doubles further in another 25 years. So we want, the government has decided to decrease this burden of CV deaths by 2025 by 1/4. And what is the issue with this CV disease burden? So the proverbial, tip of the iceberg, the known CV disease is only 1 in 3 that we see in our clinic, that we admit in hospitals. And the other 2/3, they have asymptomatic patients with type 2 diabetes who have subclinical disease. That is the mass of this iceberg. And what does known CV disease comprise of? It is coronary artery disease, heart failure, and myocardial infarction. And what does subclinical cardiovascular disease comprise of? Significant coronary artery disease, undiagnosed, untreated, subclinical heart failure, subclinical atherosclerosis, and pulseless lower limb. In other words, peripheral arterial disease. It's important to mention that 68% of asymptomatic patients with type 2 diabetes have subclinical heart failure by resting echocardiography. And this could include structural abnormality in nearly 27% of patients. It could include diastolic dysfunction, actually more prevalent than even systolic dysfunction. Diastolic dysfunction in 44%. So diastolic heart failures in more number of people in type 2 diabetes than compared to systolic dysfunction, which happens to be prevalent in about 31% of patients. And what are the examples of patients with type 2 diabetes with high likelihood of significant subclinical CVD? That the probable mass of the iceberg. So a patient with albuminuria, remember, albuminuria is a surrogate marker of coronary artery disease. A patient with ECG findings suggestive of ischemia. Any type 2 diabetic 45-year-old plus with hypertension, dyslipidemia, and family history of premature coronary artery disease. A suspect vulnerable for all the complications. A patient with absent dorsalis pedis or posterior tibial pulse. So, peripheral arterial disease. A patient with abnormal ankle brachial index. A patient with postural hypotension indicating advanced cardiac autonomic neuropathy. A patient with atypical chest pain, undiagnosed diabetic cardiac impairment. A patient with long-standing type 2 diabetes and poor control of CV risk factors. Now, it's important to know that this new encouraging molecule called the SGLT2 inhibitor, spearheaded by empagliflozin, has a stronger effect in Asian patients with type 2 diabetes. So at a baseline HbA1c of 8.2 compared to Caucasians, the HbA1c reduction is to the tune of nearly 1 as compared to 0.6 in whites, a p-value which is highly significant. We must remember that same is true for DPP-4 inhibitors as well. DPP-4 inhibitors have a more strong HbA1c reduction capacity as compared to Caucasians, but the effect seems to be more pronounced as far as SGLT2 inhibitors are concerned as compared to DPP-4 inhibitors. So efficacy of SGLT2 inhibitors and to a lesser extent DPP-4 inhibitors was greater in studies of predominantly Asian versus white ethnicity. And these results are derived from a meta-analysis of 42 placebo-controlled randomized controlled studies comparing 8,200 whites with 4,520 Asian patients, and efficacy was measured as a difference in HbA1c reduction versus placebo over a 24-week duration. Comparing empagliflozin versus glimepiride, glimepiride has been a gold standard molecule for reducing glycotoxicity in all our practice for so many years. There has been increased long-term glycemic control. The good thing is that this glycemic control comes with nearly 90% decrease in risk of hypoglycemia. So that is the beauty of this new group of drugs called the SGLT2 inhibitor. They give a better HbA1c reduction as compared to the gold standard molecule that we've been using to reduce glycotoxicity, glimepiride, and it comes at a cost which is nearly 90% less as compared to glimepiride. Now this is a concept which has emerged over the last 5 to 6 years. It's called time in range. And time in range is that we pre-decide what are the glucose values which our patient should have. So more than 180 is not time in range. Between 70 to 180 is time in range, and less than 70 is hypoglycemia. So the good thing is that even if you are using empagliflozin in a dose of 10 milligrams, the effect comes as soon as day 1. So your patients, as compared to a placebo, with which the patients are in range in about 57% of cases, in nearly more than 10% of cases, 66% cases, they are in range with empagliflozin day 1. And what is the value and what is the difference on day 28? It's to the tune of nearly 18%, 59% with placebo and 77% with empagliflozin 10 milligrams. The values are little better if you are using a higher dose of empagliflozin 25 milligram, and this is a concept which, friends, you would remember we have discussed earlier in short group meetings and large group meetings, a concept called the ambulatory glucose profile. There is this meter which we put on the deltoid posterior surface, and then there is a reader with which we read all the values, and we see for what percentage of time our patients are in range with the predetermined glucose values that we think the patient should maintain. Okay, another important good thing about SGLT2 inhibitors, as you would have now experienced, many of you are using SGLT2 inhibitors in your practice, is that empagliflozin, and when compared to the gold standard molecule, the sulfonylurea, in this case glimepiride, there is a net weight loss of nearly 5 kilograms as compared to glimepiride. And this is a study which is there for 4 years. So it is a sustained effect. It is not an effect which is short-lived, but an effect which is sustained over a period of time. So you would remember that diabetes, often called as diabesity, a combination of diabetes and obesity is one thing which pulls along all the complications in diabetes. Therefore, if you have a molecule which over a period of time decreases weight, and this weight loss is sustained, is definitely going to benefit our patients in the long term. So SGLT2 inhibition significantly decreases visceral adiposity. You would remember by your knowledge that we have discussed over the last so many years that visceral adiposity is one thing which is responsible for insulin resistance and the abnormal cytokine response that happens with adipose tissue, and all the complications, the pro-inflammatory response. So empagliflozin versus glimepiride as add-on to metformin in type 2 diabetes at 104 weeks, there is a total fat mass loss of 2.5% with empagliflozin versus glimepiride, value which is significant. 90% of weight loss with empagliflozin occurs due to fat mass loss. So this is very, very important. Abdominal visceral adipose tissue decreases by 33.7 square centimeters. So the major loss is occurring in the visceral adipose tissue, which is supposed to be the hub of insulin resistance, a significant value. Abdominal subcutaneous adipose tissue decreases to the tune of 67 square centimeters. Huge. Again, a value which is significant, and waist circumference decreases by 3.97 centimeters, a value which is again significant. SGLT2 inhibition improves cytokine profile. As I mentioned earlier, empagliflozin versus sitagliptin. So the gold standard molecule after metformin that we have been using, DPP4 inhibitors, for the same HbA1c response, not much difference between EMPA and SITA, to the tune of 0.7% reduction in HbA1c, but just see the difference in serum adiponectin response, which is significantly higher with empagliflozin, and adiponectin is a cytokine which in raised levels is going to affect insulin resistance favorably. Similarly, anti-inflammatory effects of empagliflozin in patients with type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance, the gold standard being HOMA-IR, a decrease of 42% with empagliflozin, and HSCRP, which is the gold standard inflammatory marker in type 2 diabetes, a decrease of 54%, which is very significant. SGLT2 inhibition significantly reduces the hepatic fat content in patients with type 2 diabetes and non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. You would remember, and you also know, that non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is almost synonymous with type 2 diabetes, almost a surrogate marker of low HDL and insulin resistance. And from this study called the ELIPT study, done on empagliflozin, randomized controlled trial in patients with type 2 diabetes and NAFLD for 20 weeks, there was a decrease in hepatic fat with empagliflozin versus control. So very important study and very important result, which might impact our treatment, how we treat non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's not only the gross fat, but also there are possible histological improvements in non-alcoholic steatohepatitis as early as 6 months. And these histological improvements include steatosis improvement, lobular inflammation improvement, hepatocellular ballooning improvement, NASH resolution without worsening fibrosis, fibrosis improvement, which is extremely important, because we always think that fibrosis is one thing which is irreversible. Fibrosis resolution, extremely important, and progression to cirrhosis, which is our concern when we are dealing with NASH and type 2 diabetes. Long-term decrease in insulin requirement with empagliflozin in type 2 diabetes. So, what happens when you are using empagliflozin in treatment of your patients? So, the new initiation of insulin decreases by 54%. That's very encouraging. And what happens to people where you are using empagliflozin concurrently with insulin? So, what is our concern in patients where we are using insulin? So, we keep on increasing the dose of insulin, and therefore, significant, more than 20% increase in the dose. What are the chances? There is a 57% chance that you do not have this scenario where you have to increase the dose of insulin by more than 20% if you are using SGLT2 inhibitors by more than 20%. So that's very encouraging. But we have to understand one thing, that SGLT2 inhibition is not recommended for delaying inward beta cell function. So please do not be carried away that we can use SGLT2 inhibitors in place of insulin. If there is any suggestion of poor beta cell function, hypoinsulinemia, then it may just complement insulin therapy in such patients. It is not a replacement for insulin therapy, and never use SGLT2 inhibitors in patients who are insulinopenic, because otherwise you might push them into diabetic ketoacidosis. So this message has to be very clear. Another important pleiotropic effect, if I may call it, of SGLT2 inhibition in systemic hypertension with type 2 diabetes is the nocturnal uncontrolled hypertension. From the Sakharov study, you remember that usually in normal people, the early morning blood pressure decreases. So it's called early morning dip. That's a normal response. But if the opposite happens in people, if there is an early morning surge in blood pressure, then it is linked to two important complications. One is the myocardial infarction, and another is the strokes, the fatal strokes. So, in type 2 diabetes, where we are using SGLT2 inhibitors in people with systemic hypertension, so what is happening is whether it is 24-hour systolic blood pressure, morning home systolic blood pressure, or clinic systolic blood pressure, as compared to placebo, there is a significant decrease in all these parameters, whether systolic blood pressure or nocturnal blood pressure, early morning surge of blood pressure, or clinic blood pressure. Empagliflozin resulted in regression of albuminuria, and we have two types of albuminuria, friends. You know it. We have microalbuminuria, where the albuminuria excretion is between 30 to 300 milligrams of proteins per gram of creatinine, and we have macroalbuminuria, where we have the albuminuria excretion in excess of 300 milligrams per gram of creatinine. So what will be our normal concept? Our normal concept will be that it should be effective in microalbuminuria, the disease is early, and it should not be so effective in macroalbuminuria, because then the disease has advanced. But look at the data. The data says that in microalbuminuria, there is a 43% likelihood with empagliflozin that the patient will revert to normal albuminuria, from microalbuminuria. And look at the data with macroalbuminuria, where we think the disease is advanced and probably we may not have such benefits. But actually, even in macroalbuminuria, it's almost double the advantage. 82% likelihood with empagliflozin that the patient will revert to microalbuminuria or normal albuminuria. Another important pleiotropic effect of SGLT2 inhibitors is on obstructive sleep apnea with empagliflozin versus placebo. I would like to draw your attention to the fact that obstructive sleep apnea is one thing which makes everything worse, whether it is congestive heart failure, whether it is control of diabetes, whether it is control of hypertension, one of the more important causes of persistent hypertension. And what does empagliflozin do to obstructive sleep apnea? So this is a post-hoc analysis from EMPA-REG outcome, and this change and this decrease in the new onset of obstructive sleep apnea is not thoroughly or fully explained by decrease in weight, systolic blood pressure, hematocrit, HbA1c. It only partly explains the observed risk reduction for new onset OSA. So there is something else which is causing this, and it is something which is very encouraging. In patients with type 2 diabetes and atherosclerotic CV disease, EMPA-REG outcome, empagliflozin conferred early and sustained decrease in the risk of death. You would remember the classical figure, the 38% risk reduction overall study population. What is more important to understand is that if you go into the finer print, in the Asian population, which was included in the trial, there was 56% risk reduction in the death, as compared to the overall study population. So it probably has very predominant, very pronounced effects on mortality in our Asian patients, which is of so much importance and relevance to all of us practicing in this country. Empagliflozin reduces the risk of significant CV events, patients with type 2 diabetes, atherosclerotic CVD, EMPA-REG outcome. So there are three things that which came out from the secondary analysis of EMPA-REG outcomes study based on total events, including first and recurrent events. The MACE reduced by 22%, the MI reduced by 21%, and MI or coronary revascularization reduced by 20%. So huge benefits even on secondary analysis. We know that all SGLT2 inhibitors, especially empagliflozin, have consistently shown a reduction in the risk of CV death as evidenced by EMPA-REG outcomes. And we would probably feel that it would be more evident in people who are already having heart failure evidence. But you'll be surprised to know that actually patients without even heart failure evidence, they have a hugely beneficial effect. The overall risk reduction in people without heart failure is to the tune of 37%. Remember, patients with heart failure evidence showed this only in 33%. So actually, if you start, what is the message? The message is that if we start using this molecule in people early, who do not have manifest evidence of heart failure, probably we are able to reduce mortality to a much, much higher degree than we are able to do it in people who show manifest evidence of heart failure. So by treating this important number that we call as numbers needed to treat, so I would like to tell you that by treating 6 patients with ASCVD and type 2 diabetes with empagliflozin, 1 additional hospitalization or death can be prevented in 3 years. So even if you treat only 6 patients, you are able to prevent 1 death if you treat these people type 2 diabetics for 3 years. So very, very favorable NNT. Empagliflozin lowers the risk of heart failure and mortality over 6 months in real world evidence setting of type 2 diabetes. We have already understood this from the EMPRISE early data, and now we have this article published, in patients with type 2 diabetes initiating empagliflozin and DPP-4 inhibitors, and this was published in Diabetes in 2021, very, very recent. Patients without CVD and patients with CVD. Empagliflozin, DPP-4 inhibitors, hugely impacting, the mortality in type 2 diabetes, whether without CVD or with CVD. So this is something which is very important for us to understand, and therefore it will be pertinent to say that it's very important for us to use this molecule early in the disease. Another important aspect of the whole discourse, friends, is the kidney outcomes. SGLT2 improves kidney outcomes according to the EGFR categories, across EGFR categories. Actually, more than 90 is normal, 60 to 90, then 45 to 60, and then 30 to 45. You remember that all patients who were enrolled for EMPA-REG were more than 45. EGFR, what was the effect? Measured with major adverse kidney events. Okay, MACE, major adverse cardiovascular event. Now you have a new term called the MAKE, major adverse kidney events. Okay, more than 50% decrease in EGFR, ESKD, that is end-stage kidney disease or all-cause mortality. What was the result? 32% decrease in risk for kidney events with empagliflozin versus non-SGLT2 inhibitors. P-value which is highly significant. Now, that was according to EGFR. Now, what according to the albuminuria? According to the albuminuria, normal is less than 30 milligram per gram of creatinine. And you have microalbuminuria category 30 to 300. And then you have macroalbuminuria category more than 300. So what was the result? The result again was 32% relative risk reduction for kidney events with empagliflozin versus the group which was not using SGLT2 inhibitor, a p-value which is highly significant. So in patients, subgroup with atherosclerotic CVD and type 2 diabetes, SGLT2 inhibitors cardiovascular outcomes have demonstrated improvement in CV outcomes, whether it is MACE, whether it is cardiovascular death, or it is hospitalization for heart failure. What is important to understand is that all the SGLT2 inhibitors, whether it is empagliflozin, whether it is Canvas, the canagliflozin, or Declare, or Vertis, all have significant effects on hospitalization for heart failure. But when it comes to MACE, there are only 2 molecules. which are impacting it significantly. It's empagliflozin and the canagliflozin. And the bottom line, friends, which molecule is affecting the cardiovascular death? It's neither canagliflozin, it's not the declared TIMI molecule, it's not the ertagliflozin, it's only the empagliflozin which is impacting the cardiovascular death. So we have this ADA standard of care recommendations in 2021 for patients with type 2 diabetes, ASCVD, heart failure and CKD benefits recommended with various SGLT2 inhibitor agents. And we have already described it that when it comes to decreasing MACE, you have two molecules, and those molecules are empagliflozin and canagliflozin. But when it comes to decreasing heart failure hospitalizations, all the four molecules, whether it is dapagliflozin, ertagliflozin, canagliflozin or empagliflozin, are effective. But when it comes to the baseline, and what is the baseline, the bottom line of decreasing cardiovascular mortality in type 2 diabetes, only one molecule, stands the Agni Pariksha, and that molecule is empagliflozin. Okay, no other molecule. There are good comparisons with GLP-1 receptor agonists. Liraglutide in the real trial, as you know, has shown as promising results as empagliflozin, and now has class 1A recommendation along with empagliflozin for early use in type 2 diabetes for reducing and achieving favorable cardiovascular outcomes. So if you had 100 patients with type 2 diabetes and coronary artery disease, and you were to treat them with empagliflozin for 3 years, so apart from good HbA1c reduction on the top of standard care, what else would you achieve? So you would achieve 10 CV events which will be prevented. 9 chronic kidney events which will be prevented. You will be able to prevent 3.5 acute kidney injury, acute renal failure, hyperkalemia events. Most importantly, in 13% of patients, you will be able to prevent or delay insulin treatment. In 5 patients, you would achieve additional systolic blood pressure goals in resistant hypertension where you would be thinking of using other molecules. In 5.5% of patients of edema and new obstructive sleep apnea events will be prevented. But most important, and the sum of it, friends, is that 3.5 total additional life years will be gained. 3.5 साल आप अपने मरीजों को देंगे additional जीने के लिए. So friends, from my side, this is the presentation on empagliflozin, SGLT2 inhibitors, their current use, and what else we can hope, aspire from this promising group of molecules. I hope my presentation has been useful to all of you, and I have been able to carry home the point that this is a very promising group of molecules which we should start using early in our patients so that we can achieve the best cardiovascular outcomes. Over to you, Dr. Mathur, sir.
Thank you, Sushil, for a very exhaustive presentation on SGLT2 inhibitor as a novel molecule we talk about in the diabetic management. I would like to appreciate your one thing, the subclinical evidence of cardiovascular thing, where the SGLT inhibitor can really make a lot of difference. As I always remember, subclinical hypothyroidism in time can make a lot of difference. So is the subclinical CV disease, which is very common in the diabetic patient. As a timely intervention can be given by drugs, which you talked about, SGLT2 inhibitors, they make a lot of difference. It's a wonderful talk, sir. We're really very happy to hear all the things. Few questions on the side. How EMPRISE is a different from the CVD real study, real life study, since both are real world evidence. The question is, EMPRISE is different from CVD real study, since both are real world evidence.
Sir, EMPRISE is actually real world evidence, and it was a comparison between two concurrent molecules that we are using in our practice, that is the DPP-4 inhibitors
and
SGLT2 inhibitors. And we continue to have data from Emprise even now, as I presented the data today from Emprise. So the Emprise, why Emprise was needed? Because we always thought that after metformin, what molecule? And we thought that DPP-4 was the standard, the gold standard. But the Emprise real world evidence showed us that if you use SGLT2 inhibitors in place of DPP-4 inhibitors, the results that you get are much more encouraging. So that is Emprise. But the real world evidence can come from anywhere. We have real world evidence from Scandinavia, we have other real world evidence from other countries. But the Emprise is specifically SGLT2 inhibitors versus DPP-4 inhibitors.
Sushil, another information from you. There is a young diabetic, 35-year-old, there is no hypertension, weight, BMI is well maintained, and has a strong history of heart disease in the family. He is on a DPP-4 inhibitor, but and glimepiride with metformin. His HbA1c remains about 7.5. Is a good time to intervene with the SGLT inhibitor to him?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So weight neutral, weight is BMI is maintained.
I understand. The only thing that you have to guard against is that your patient should not be insulinopenic. If your patient is not insulinopenic, always go for SGLT2 inhibitors as soon as possible to achieve the best possible cardiovascular outcomes in your patient.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. Another thing which I would like to ask, how do you see DAPA generic over the empagliflozin?
So it's a very good question. Now understand this, and this is for everyone. I gave a table to all of you in which we compared three things. Okay? What did we compare? We compared major adverse cardiovascular events, number one. We compared overall reduction in cardiovascular death, number two. And we compared hospitalizations because of heart failure. I am not talking of DAPA specifically now. I will include all the four classical SGLT2 inhibitors that we have been using. So what happens to MACE when you are using empagliflozin, canagliflozin, dapagliflozin and ertugliflozin? Only two SGLT2 inhibitors impact major adverse cardiovascular events. One is empagliflozin, the second is canagliflozin. What happens to the hospitalizations because of heart failure? All the four molecules impact hospitalizations because of heart failure significantly. So it looks to be a class effect. But now come to the bottom line. What is the bottom line? The bottom line is, how are we able to impact cardiovascular death? Agreed, sir?
Agreed.
How are you able to prevent death?
Yep, that's true.
Only one molecule, empagliflozin, is able to prevent cardiovascular death to the tune of 38%, sir.
Thank you, Sushil. This is very well highlighted.
What does this mean? Because all the four molecules are impacting hospitalizations because of heart failure. So the reduction in cardiovascular death is not solely dependent on impact on heart failure. There is something else which is causing this. So this is very important to understand. And therefore only one molecule is impacting overall cardiovascular death. And we have to be very, very particular about it. We have to emphasize on it and we have to understand it.
Thank you, Sushil. Very well explained. Though SGLT inhibitor as a class effect has got so many pleomorphic effects, but particularly when talked about empagliflozin, you brought out it so very well. It's a very well to understand. Thank you, Sushil, for that. Now, I don't have any discussion right now. There's so many discussions can be asked, but I would like to compliment you. The way you have taken forward the impact of SGLT inhibitors on the cardiac disease is relatively and I was very impressed by subclinic ischemic disease, which is, I think, we miss very often. Analyzing the patient of diabetic, what all the risk factor is carrying with him, how best to prevent those risk factors to go into the event particularly. I think that's very well brought out by you. Thank you, Sushil. I think I have no other question to say. I only compliment you once again. Thank you, Sushil. Thank you so much.
Sir, there is a question asked